Well, good morning and welcome to Bible class. And this morning, or whenever you're actually listening to this, we wanted to look at the other topic that I had planned for the walk through Jerusalem. And even though we're not doing that as we planned to do it, I still found the information interesting. I hope you did. This article was a lot shorter than the one on or the ones I gave you on medicine. But anyway, I thought there was some interesting things here about biblical money in the time of Jesus. So let's go work our way through this. Um, this one should have been fairly easy for you for homework purposes. First question was which is actually number 32. What was the standard unit of Roman currency? And the standard of Roman currency was the denarius. And I put or drachma. That's actually the Greek word. And they used the word drachma more often actually in the article, I think, than they did denarius. But they did use denarius scripturally. And I'm trying to remember what's the story of the unjust steward on Odyssey, where he yells, "Show me the denarii." I can't scream like he does, but anyway, I hear that voice when we say that. So anyway, a denarius, and a denarius was the equivalent to a day's wage for a laborer. And this is very useful because I always struggle when they do monetary conversions, and some of the ones I've read seem really out of whack. Sometimes it's because the commentary, if it's been written very long ago, the amount of wage for a day's labor has changed dramatically since, say, Adam Clark wrote his commentary back in the 1700s. Just for an example. Anyway, so I actually have you calculate that based on current minimum wage in Ohio and an 8-hour day, which is what we do here in the States. And that gets us that a denarius is about $68.40. And I hope I did my math right, and I hope you did your math right, because if not, you're going to get every other one wrong, because all of them are built off of a denarius. All of the money that they talked about is built off of a denarius. So we have the denarius is kind of the standard unit that's kind of in the middle. It's a mid-range monetary value. And then they talked about a shekel. And they tell us in the article that a shekel is 4 denarii, which if I did my multiplication correctly, I use my phone calculator, so it should be $273.60. And that is a shekel. And but interestingly, they talked about a variety of different kinds of shekels and half shekels and so forth. And the temple tax had to be paid in Tyrian shekels. And the reason they used Tyrian shekels is because they did not have the image of an earthly ruler on it. Now, that's what this article said. I read another article in doing research for this, and they commented the fact that even though they didn't have any earthly ruler on them, which the Jews felt really strongly about, they did actually have some Greek gods or things related to Greek mythology on the shekels. And so I thought that was kind of interesting that they did that. Tyrian means they are from the city of Tyre, which is in Lebanon today. That's where Jezebel was from, actually. But anyway, in the Phoenicians of Lebanon were very big in trade. They were major traders, and anyway, that was the temple coin. So the money changers in the temple would have been trading other Roman money for Tyrian shekels. And all of these, the denarii, the drachma, the shekels, were all made of silver. And so a fairly precious metal, and in this case, the middle range precious metal. And so those two coins, the denarius or drachma and the shekel, were both made of silver. And then they switched to, and I'll give you a hint here for a later question, these are the gold coins. And the first gold coin was an aurus, or however it is pronounced, which was 25 denarii, which, if I did it correctly, is about $1,710. And I don't know that we're going to talk about that one too much. That one was not one that I was as familiar with. The next one, the talent, well, we hear used quite often in Scripture. And according to this, a talent was about 10,000 drachmas, or about $684,000. So a talent is a big deal. And if you remember the story of the talents, when the master gives out, in the one story he gives everybody 1 talent, and the other one he gives them 1, 5, and 10 talents. That's a fairly good chunk of change that they're being given to work with. Um, can you imagine getting $684,000 and all you do is bury it under a rock? Anyway, so that was the talent. And as I've already said, I gave you the answer to this one early. Both of those are gold coins. And so that's question number 40. Both the aureus and the talent were made of gold coins. Now we get to the ones that are much more likely to have been spent in Jerusalem. Those coins were a day's wage and obviously going up quite a bit from that. So a small change. The first one that they mention is a sestertius, which is a quarter of a denarius, which, if I worked it out correctly, comes out to about $17.10. And so that would be like a $20 bill, and that would be the sestertius. The one that was more likely to be used than that, they said, was the Assyrian, which they could abbreviate with either end of the word, interestingly. And it was worth about $4.28. And so this would be like a $5 bill. I know I'm rounding, but just for comparison purposes, like a $5 bill. And I thought this was neat. They mentioned this fact that in Matthew 10:29, you can buy 2 sparrows for 1 Assyrian. And in Luke 12:6, you can get 5 for 2 Assyrians. So they said this is your first buy 4, get 1 free deal. So, but anyway, so when Jesus says, sparrows aren't worth much, you buy 2 of them for a penny. That is a Assyrian. So they're 2 for $4.28. So that was his definition of not very expensive things. The next one then is a quadrans. And they tell us that a quadrans was a quarter of an Assyrian, which would make it about $1.07. So here we're getting to a simple dollar bill. And this would be the quadrans. And then the smallest one that they mention is a lepton, and a lepton is a quarter of a quadrans, which would give you a 27-cent coin, which would basically be a quarter. So we're down to a basic coin here. That was the smallest coin that they mentioned, and all of these are made of copper. So these would be copper coins. So probably most of the people who were wandering around Jerusalem on that first Easter morning that we were wanting to kind of recreate would have probably been carrying copper coins. The only one they might have been carrying would have been the denarii, which would have been a silver coin, which would be a fairly large coin, still $60-some. I don't know if those numbers really still quite connect. We're trying to do it from basically days labor. How long you have to work to get this kind of money. But buying power is the other thing, and it's very hard to compare buying power. I don't remember from science class, we had the Big Mac was a unit of purchasing power, and it's really hard to know what a Big Mac cost in Jerusalem, so in the first century. So it's hard to compare those things. But anyway, this kind of gives you a feeling for it. Now, I just want to throw a few things in. I didn't include the Bible stories in the lesson that I had you guys figure things out. And as I was putting the PowerPoint together, I thought this is really interesting, though. So I just want to go through these fairly quickly with the numeric values. The woman's lost coin, this is the woman who has 10 coins and loses 1 coin, and she's searching for it. The actual value of that coin would have been about $68. And so that's actually relatively significant if you think about it. And of course, you remember in economics, Mr. Gould mentioned the fact that it may have been actually more important for sentimental value as far as what it meant to her. It had a significance other than its value. But at any rate, that was the denarius, which would have been about $68. The Samaritan, the Good Samaritan, when he leaves the inn and he leaves the Jewish man in the inn, he leaves 2 denarii behind. So that's about $136. So the Good Samaritan's putting out a good amount of money to take care of this man. Now, granted, that's a lot cheaper than what you can get a hotel today or an inn, especially if they're going to take care of some guy from, you're working at Dublin as a hospital, and trust me, you're not going to get a hospital for any $136. In the story of the unjust steward, the smaller debt that where the steward makes the fellow slave go to jail to pay it off was about $6,800 with these numbers that we were working through. So that's a decent debt. We're going to compare that to the bigger debt here in a little bit, but that's still a significant debt. This one I thought was interesting when Jesus sent Peter to get the temple tax out of the fish's mouth. What Peter pulled out was about a $275 coin. So that was a significant. Now, of course, Peter didn't get to keep it. He had to turn it into the temple to pay the tax. That was the whole point. But that's still a significant amount of money to pull out of a fish's mouth. Herod the Great, they gave us his yearly income in talents, if remembering correctly, and it was about $634 million a year in modern terms. So Herod the Great was a multi-millionaire. That's a lot of money. Of course, he did a lot of stuff with his money, but nevertheless. And this one's even more amazing. The unjust steward who had the large debt, that was actually $6,340 million debt that he got forgiven, and then he turns around and beats up the other guy for a $6,800 debt. If somebody's just forgiving you $6 billion, you should be gracious enough to give up to ignore a $6,000 debt. That's or $7,000 debt, rounding off. But anyway, which is Jesus' whole point. If you have been forgiven, you need to forgive. Anyway, on the other end of these stories, a loaf of bread would have cost $4.28. They mention that Jesus mentions that in one of his stories. One of the times Jesus says about if your neighbor is angry with you, you should go make peace with him, because if you don't make peace with him, he will sue you and take your last penny. And that would have been that dollar, the quadrans, was worth about $1. That's what Jesus is referring to. So he says last penny would translate really to last dollar. And the other one was the widow's mite, and it was actually 2 leptons, they said, which would make it about 50 cents. So when the widow puts her last coin in the offering plate, that was a 50-cent coin, and that was the end of her money. Anyway, so I hope you enjoyed this. Probably the money, some of this, I'll let you know which of these monies will actually end up on the test, because I don't think I want you to just memorize all of it with all of these numbers. That doesn't seem real valuable. But I would like you to have some knowledge of these. So I'll let you know exactly what will show up on the test. But anyway, so thank you for taking some time to talk about, or to listen to me talk about biblical money, and we'll go back to philosophy in our next class.